Kicking things off, and so consider yourselves kicked, is our reader today, Paul E. Dickey. Mr. Dickey comes to creative writing, or maybe back to creative writing, from a career in data processing and from degree work in the world of philosophy. In fact, he teaches at Metropolitan Community College up in Omaha, and what he teaches is not literature or creative writing, but introduction to philosophy, critical reasoning, introduction to ethics. So that might be interesting talking points for some of you as you're milling around and purchasing his book and chatting with him after the reading. He's also, this is interesting too, doing theatrical work. He's written full-length plays, one-act plays, and what his Vita calls 10-minute plays. I'm all in favor of that, by the way. In fact, I've written some one-minute plays, and I'm thinking of pioneering a world in which I actually write deficit creative writing, flashier fiction and no-minute plays, and then readers have to pay me money for the amount of time they haven't spent reading my work. Just tell me what you think about it when you're milling around afterwards. In addition to poems in a number of journals, there's a long list here, some of the best known of which would be Crab Orchard Review, Midwest Quarterly, the Southern Poetry Review. Mr. Dickey is the author of a number of books, the most recent of which is the rather nice looking They Say This Is How Death Came Into the World. It is, with a few of his other titles on that table, available for sale. Those of you who are in an MFA program and dream of doing a book of your own one day might want to keep in mind that what goes around comes around. I don't know what Mr. Dickey is going to be reading today. It may be newer work, it may be older work, but I can tell you for a fact that there's some formally interesting stuff in this book. It's a book of poetry, but a lot of it takes the shape of prose poetry. Some of it perhaps resembles flash fiction, and in fact one of the poems toward the end of the book is called Class. Is this a prose poem or flash fiction? And many of the poems have that kind of wry, ironic twist to them, bringing together a wealth of topical reference that goes from well-known classical philosophers to people from out of contemporary popular culture. Frank Sinatra, Lennon, and McCartney, they take their place in these poems along with Heidegger, for instance. So it's a lively mix. I suspect it's going to be a lively reading, and I would like everybody to turn off your cell phones. Or I'll hurt you. And put your hands together for a very warm welcome to Mr. Paul Dickey.
Thank you, Albert. Thank you, Margaret and Melissa, for inviting me to read today. I am very, very pleased to be reading today at Wichita State University. This is really where I began the dastardly act of writing poetry. I started as an undergraduate here at Wichita State University. I took my first poetry workshop here in 1968 with the poet Michael Van Walligen. I hope some of you know him. He just, I think, recently retired from Illinois. That was before there was an MFA program here. If you know Michael, you will know that I probably got a very heavy dose of Rilke and W.D. Snodgrass, who was Michael Van Walligen's instructor. So there's probably some confessional trend in these poems, but these poems are not, I repeat, not autobiographical. There were two absolute no-nos in Van Walligen's workshop back in 1968, and that was, first of all, your poems should never be clever. Never be clever. I think I'm going to violate that today. They should also not be sentimental. And one of the things that he kept preaching that Snodgrass had solved for us is the way to be personal without being sentimental. Well, I might write like that too. After graduating from WSU in 1970, I went to Indiana University and studied philosophy of science. It was a great experience. I learned a lot, met a lot of contemporary philosophers, but I never got over the bug of writing, and I wanted to write and not do philosophy. So I came back to WSU in 1973. Van Walligen was gone, but I met Ben Santos. If you know much about Ben Santos, he was an excellent instructor, very encouraging, and helped me make a transition from linear poetry, some old kind of poetry, confessional poetry, even into prose and fiction. Ben gave me the credit to give myself permission to write, and that's what I think was highly evident. At the time, I also studied poetry with Bruce Cutler, who was here. And these are the early days of the formation of the MFA program, if you're familiar with the history. But at the time, I was really more interested in some of the new poets, Greg Kuzma, James Tate, and some young poet named Albert Goldbarth, if anybody remembers him. At the time, you probably would have seen Albert all the time in the Ark River Review, which is a journal that's put out by some professors at Wichita State, and he hogged all of the space, and I couldn't get into it. Okay, I won't bore you anymore with all of those stories, but if you want to talk about that, catch me after the reading. I'd love to talk about it. I'm going to start reading today some of my prose poems. Out of my book, They Say This Is How Death Came Into the World. The first poem is entitled A Bad Break. It's a poem about the New York Yankees and Lou Gehrig, who Lou Gehrig said, "I'm the luckiest man in the world. I just got a bad break." This is called A Bad Break. Lou Gehrig is crying. Lou Gehrig is crying for every story in New York City. Lou Gehrig is wiping down every bleacher seat in Yankee Stadium with his salt. Lou Gehrig, he has the right. He banged everyone with a homer. DiMaggio can't believe the greatest ball player he ever played with is crying. Gehrig once hit behind Babe. Lou Gehrig is crying. It fills every stein and mug in the Bronx. Gehrig wanted to play in every game. DiMaggio wants a hit in every game. DiMaggio marries a bomb who will sleep with the president. Lou Gehrig is crying up and down Broadway. He just got a bad break. He says he is the luckiest man in the world. The Babe and Gehrig are hugging like sisters. They don't speak to each other. Gehrig's mother said something once about Babe's wife. Lou Gehrig is crying. DiMaggio still loves Marilyn. He is laying flowers on her grave. They were going to be married again. Lou Gehrig is crying. Lou Gehrig is crying down at the financial district where someday the big bucks will build our future at the World Trade Center. Casey says DiMaggio won't play ball if he can't play ball the way Joe DiMaggio is expected to play ball, and it's only to take the money. Joe DiMaggio is an American hero. Joe DiMaggio's father was named Giuseppe in San Francisco in 1942. That took guts. Lou Gehrig is crying. Ruth, Gehrig, DiMaggio. Now the commerce kid, like Babe, wants to hit a home run off every broad in the city. His dad gave him a baseball when he was hours old, but sometimes Mickey Charles preferred a bottle. The Mick needs your liver now. He and Billy and Whitey, for a while, drank up all of Gary's tears. The next poem I'll read is entitled Because It Is My Heart. I'm sure you'll recognize that as Stephen Crane. I noticed as I was preparing today that your MFA reading list includes the complete poems of Crane. It doesn't say if it means Stephen or not, but I'm going to think it does. This poem is entitled Because It Is My Heart. I was to have lunch with the complete poems of Stephen Crane. The department chair had arranged everything. I didn't know if I would recognize Stephen anymore. For many years, no one seemed to know what had happened to him. Some even thought maybe he had died. Some of the new faculty thought maybe he had never lived. Stephen was late, didn't bring all the poems, and wouldn't say grace. Yet the world wars that had intervened since we had last met appeared to have been kind to him. He glared at the maitre d' and the menu. 3 little birds in a row, perched on his shoulder. All hour they sang, and they were about to sing. They coaxed me also to sing, to raise my voice in the spirit of Whitman and Dickinson, but no longer in chorus with the divine. I told him I wanted to raise a toast to the supreme fiction of the Wallace Stevens century and write this poem someday. The birds laughed out loud at me. He muttered mostly to himself, and to think, Howells called my lines prose poems. I could not help but notice the busboy, aged about 14, was me. George's mother did not know he was here. She had dropped him off at church school just a few hours before and a few blocks away. George. I call him that because that is the boy's name, whispered in hushed tones. Stephen Crane. Oh, Stephen Crane. I know where the little church is and the apartment where Mother's God once lived. Okay, so Wichita, Kansas, the home of the BTK killer, right? It's an interesting story to me, and very personal too, because I went to school with his wife from like 4th grade through senior high school. And her name was Dietz, and my name is Dickey. So you can imagine what unimaginative school teachers with their alphabetical seating charts did. I usually sat next to her in class for a long time. So I've tried in this very short prose poem to establish some of that terror. The husband's locked backyard shed. I would tell you what he keeps there if I knew. My sisters say I would deny that snow all winter covers the metal shed, while the shiny lock has been opened time and time again. Their eyes snap. Girl, there have been murders in the neighborhood. All I know is all that I do not know is the next best thing to love. And that when his hands surprise me in the dark and he says something ordinary, at last he is close, closer than whatever it is he is. Okay. Now this next poem has a lot of unsavory characters in it. Characters such as my wife's image of me, my image of myself, her image of me, those kind of unsavory characters. The poem's entitled Images of. My wife's image of me and my image of myself met for a drink and to have a heart-to-heart. We were going to get things ironed out. But at the club, we bumped into the lovers, my image of her and her image of herself, who surely were not expecting to see us. They were with their boyfriends, her image of him and his image of himself. His image of himself said something rude to my image of myself. And that seemed to be in cahoots with my wife's image of me. My image of her seemed to be embarrassed and ashamed of my image of myself. And then she went home with her image of me. His image of her walked in the door at that time, and wanted to have it out with anyone who wanted to have it out with them. The only one that did was my image of her. My wife and I arrived shortly thereafter, but left right away because of all the commotion. If at all possible, I particularly wanted to avoid running into my wife's image of herself. When it all comes down to the last resort, our star reliever is truth. Although on occasion, we may keep him warming up in the bullpen, rest his knuckleball, doubt that he exists, fine him for showing up late for pre-games, consult with a general manager about our options on his contract. After all, dear, it is our life. And no, we didn't mean to have it all happen like this. So what right does he have signing autographs for the little kids to sleep with when we may be going into extra innings? I confess, he sleeps with the third baseman's wife. The manager knows these things, but I have a team to think of. How you prove anything and everything. Faith prowls the accident scene, hawking its wares. A shyster in search of clients. Police scour for evidence. Anthropologists dig for Darwinian theory. Anything to tell the press. But the facts are, 2 people were dead, and a stranger called 911 and saved my life tonight. Yes, 2 people. One I will never know, and the other forever, all my life. And she, me, all her life. Creationists say God's will. Isn't it obvious? But witnesses say that this oil has existed millions of years, made this car skid. I can't buy a theory in this marketplace. A kid in an ice cream truck rings a bell and sings along with the tune. Hey, come on, you gotta have faith. Pascal tries to lay down a bet, but before he can, people fight and shove like Christmas to about the kid's inventory on credit. Pascal's bet is the argument for the existence of God, that if God doesn't exist and you believe in him, what have you lost? But if God does exist, and you don't believe in him, you've lost everything. That was Pascal's bet. Okay, now I'm going to read one more prose poem that you're probably going to need to get out your MFA reading list for, because it makes a lot of references to the items that are on that. Okay. The thought of what America would be like if. Remember, you don't know me. This isn't just one of those tricks we pull off in America. Walk into the Safeway 15 seconds apart and both buy 10, 12 can packs of Dr. Pepper for $1.99 each when the limit is 10 per customer, and they meet at the trunk of our car to stow away the goods. You don't know me, really. I have a thought of what America. I have a thought of what America would be like. What America would be like if the police were at the door. Now, quick. Ruth is beautiful. Our beautiful Ruth. That is all you know and all you need to know. Or, as Lily Tomlin put it, if truth is beauty, how come no one has her hair done in the library? Well, I'll be there if you need me, getting a shave and being fitted for a new suit and wig. But don't tell the police that if you can help it. Be great and tact as you have been untaught. Ask them in for a cup of coffee. Call in the media to advise, to see or not to see. Ask them that, will you? Is all we see or seem but a cream within a cream? I'll use the precious seconds to escape by the name of Annabelle Lee, my beautiful Annabelle Lee. It's okay, dear. You and I won't write for each other anyway. She lives with no other plot than to love and be loved by me. And what America would be like if so much depends upon the red SUV outfoxing the white cop cars. Two rogues divulged a yellow road. When the evening is spread out against the sky, I've seen America. Next to, of course, God, I do not find. They will sing for me. Congress is the emperor of pipe dreams. Martha. In the Mount Vernon Gazette this morning, the very talk of aborters at Key West, that kingdom by the sea. At the Little League game, I heard a fly buzz before the side was retired. If the classics had a wide circulation, Emily, we could not be to be. Ergo, I am home, Penelope. I just went out for a pack of Lucky Strikes at the Safeway. Oh, well, it troubles my sleep. I shall be telling this with a sigh, ages and ages hence, when the evening is spread out against the sky. I too sing America. What America would be like if nevermore. Ruth is beautiful. Our beautiful Ruth. That is all you know and all you need to know. Okay, I'm going to read one poem that I sneaked in the book as a prose poem, but it probably can't be distinguished from a flash fiction. It's entitled Lennon and McCartney, and it's basically going off on the idea of what would have happened had what happened not gotten away. Okay? Lennon and McCartney. 62-year-old Paul McCartney, a bankrupt businessman of Liverpool, strolled down Penny Lane, watching children laugh behind the back of a banker with a motor car. He worried how he was going to pay the rent due next week on his flat across the hall from Father Mackenzie. He He carried an old transistor radio that he had pilfered from the junk shop down by Strawberry Fields. It was all he had now on which to listen to the BBC. A new tune came on the waves and he quickly flicked off. He didn't want to listen to it. He remembered when he was a lad listening to the Everly Brothers and Buddy Holly. But the music just didn't seem to go anywhere after a while, and Mr. McCartney had got on in business, though now that had failed him too. Besides Holly, he had liked that bloke Bob Dylan, but American folk music got old, and Dylan by himself couldn't take it anywhere modern. If only Paul had listened to his mom, who had wanted Paulie himself to take music lessons. He laughed. Maybe he could have merged Dylan's stuff together with the Everlys. Then the music would have gone somewhere. Not that tinny stuff you hear on the BBC these days. But Paul knew that you could drive yourself crazy wondering about what could have been. He crossed paths that day with one John Lennon, age 64, an unkempt street painter, losing his hair, with birthday greetings and a bottle of wine in his pocket. 20 quid for a portrait, sir? Paul McCartney wasn't used to being called sir, and he thought about it, but he didn't have the 20 quid. Mr. Lennon already was walking down Abbey Road, whistling. He was on his way home. It was October. It was the year 2004, and John Lennon was simply happy to be alive. Thank you. I'm going to read a few poems now that are not prose poems, that are more lineal poems. The first one's entitled Delivering to the Client. All afternoon, within the cubicles, it has been raining requirements. Code meanders down screens, a river depositing content to reservoirs in large cities. The river is muddy. Testers look for unintended consequences. Silt, small towns from nowhere, sapping resources on the banks. Driftwood and beavers filling dams. Their will is to break everything, but they could miss the isolated farmstead where a man in the rain works on a tractor. Inside him is a boy who insists that tomorrow, when it stops raining, he will go fishing. Okay, the next poem is Photographs of Door County. Door County is a resort area in northern Wisconsin on Lake Michigan. This poem, again, is not autobiographical. Photographs of Door County. At last, Joni and I meet James. Fumbling, he shows us photographs of Door County. In the first, Lake Michigan is flat as glass, but with his single sail somehow in the center. The only sound I hear is the awkward Canada geese. In the next, there was a family in the distance he did not know yet, having been there only one day. A girl and a boy have fishing poles. It seems to me the father struggles to get the boat into the water while the wife loads their final needs. My daughter acts casual, but her eyes wink that this may be it. Begs me to study his next photograph even more carefully. Not knowing, James sits in her mother's chair. She has been gone now a full season. Joni's cream and sugar voice sails into the room with coffee. There is no tide. This afternoon, there is little wind, although the waves still come in. They go out and they come in. Okay, I'll read one more of these. Somewhere once a house. We could have lived anywhere, strung light and power around a tree. You could have dried your hair. We made money in the wind, caught for a minute on limbs and blew away. Yes, dear, we sinned, arguing which debt could go first or stay years. Proposed bets until our pockets were bare. Invited birds to spend the night, to nestle in your blouse, whipped into rags by a clothesline while we slept. But no, we lived in this house. Okay, my book came out in January, so most of these poems I've read were written probably at least 2 or 3 years ago, many, some even much more than that. So I'd like to give you a bit of an idea what I've been writing since the book came out. The first one here reflects on some of the advice you get in Richard Hugo's Triggering Town, also on your MFA reading list. Okay, this poem is entitled Bankruptcy in Ellettsville, okay, for Richard Hugo. The bank's vault, loaded with once friendly girls and cash, dropped off the map last night. Men in black suits were seen on the outskirts, struggling with our tomorrows. Snuggling with our tomorrows, sorry. Hymnals fled out of state, passing young and virtuous fields of sweet air. We went home for our axes, broke open the safe to claim what was rightfully ours. But by time we got there, the metal hummed the train's sad whistle. The corn grew back taller than ever in its sweet time, produced sons and daughters, though our wives that night had run off with any moon or star that would have them. Pebbles. In the middle of love, there was a large stone. Soon there were little pebbles all over. What was once a green valley was becoming a rocky hillside. There was one thing to do, but we would not hear of it. Rather, we bought wine buckets at great cost, gathered the small pebbles and collected them, one small bucket at a time. Pounded the large stone with hammers and made more pebbles, of which we were always proud, and carried them away to a place by the church and by the river. Through it all, the stone remained large. By the time the sun was down and the day was done and the moon was up, there were more pebbles than ever before. But we were tired then, and we lay down. Okay, let me read you a couple prose poems, and then if we have time, I'll read you one more poem from the book. Closing Plants, Still Manufacturing, Dwight Eisenhower. They say America is no longer the manufacturing superpower it once was. Bottom line, Harry and Ike are not creating the new jobs they promised America. Physicists say Harry S. Truman mattered. He was a solid at room temperature, a concrete brick with drilled and engineered holes used to build skyscrapers, as was Dwight David Eisenhower. They had recognizable mass and occupied clearly defined space. They travel at a given and predictable rate of speed. You could recognize photographs of them and not mistake them for Brigitte Bardot or Sophia Loren. It was the days before charisma, but they had presence. Now Harry Truman and Dwight Eisenhower are liquids. Their volume remains fixed, though you're not sure where they stand on the current war on health care or the national debt. Their photos are digital. Sometimes they look like Paris Hilton, and sometimes they look like Miley Cyrus. Their shape is the shape in which they are contained. The particles are free to move about the cabin. They say Harry Truman and Dwight Eisenhower soon will be nothing but vapors of gas. They are no longer at room temperature. The volume of a gas is negotiable. It does not attach images of itself to its span. It takes up space so the particles are uniformly distributed in air. You can friend Harry and Ike on Facebook, but their websites inflict your hard drive with Trojans. You may mistake them for ladies who are no ladies, and with no names you can call them in public. In the future, young people will have to find jobs making something other than Harry S. Truman and Dwight David Eisenhower. And this poem is entitled Hacking Rilke's Phone. This needs to be the last one. Hacking Rilke's Phone. And this uses some quotes from Rilke's novel, The Notebooks of Multiple Ridge Bridge. Rilke won't play ball with us, they said, but we got the scoop. He had no clue what our thugs are now capable of. He thought it a scandal that his patron, Werner Reinhardt, had put him up in a drafty capsule. But now we can tell you why he did. It was just modern journalism. We got this on tape from the man professing silence to the world, even so-called solitude. One must see many cities, men, and things. One must be able to think back to the days of childhood that are still unexplained, to parents whom one had to hurt when they brought joy and did not grasp it. Although admittedly, we ached to get them on prime time cable news for the ratings, we could not imagine or abide his hypocrisy and rigged treason. He got away in the end with nothing from us, even though he continued to protest. And it's not yet enough. One must have memories of many nights of love, none like the others. One must have been beside the dying, sat beside the dead in the room with the open window and the fitful noise. Not till then can it happen that in the most rare hour, the first word goes forth. Us? Ashamed? Nah, we were proud of ourselves. Elbowed out of the news cycle, we thought the world would lose interest in this minor bohemian poet. We had bugged his room. We had bugged his roses with thorns for the sake of a single story. Okay, I think that's good. Thank you very much.